A CEO unexpectedly visited one of his coastal properties. A young black waiter nervously approached and handed him a folded piece of paper. What happened next unveiled a massive embezzlement scheme, dismantled a dangerous criminal network, and left the most influential crime boss in the city utterly stunned. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. At 45, Julian possessed a fortune that could bankroll small nations' resorts spanning 4 continents and a reputation that made rivals quiver. Yet as he sat at his sleek glass desk in a bespoke linen suit, reviewing last quarter's reports with his cold brew coffee, a familiar weight of isolation pressed against his chest. Oasis Holdings Miami Coral Coast Cafe location, number 17 inches. He murmured, his sharp blue eyes scanning the disheartening figures. Revenue down 22%, guest complaints up 38%, employee turnover at a startling 70%. This beachfront gem, a chic Art Deco bistro he'd personally designed to honor his great-grandmother's entrepreneurial spirit, was bleeding money and credibility. Julian's jaw tightened as he scrolled through a litany of complaints. Unfriendly staff, lukewarm food, messy tables, unwelcoming atmosphere. Each review was a direct hit to his core. His great-grandmother, Clara Vance, had taught him that hospitality was a sacred art that every guest deserved to feel cherished. She'd meticulously managed a small guest house in Key West, her hands perpetually smelling of fresh citrus and her heart overflowing with kindness for all who entered. Jules, her memory echoed, a business thrives when it makes people feel they truly belong. He'd built his empire on that very principle, but somewhere along the way, corporate directives and profit forecasts had eclipsed genuine human connection. When was the last time he'd genuinely experienced one of his establishments as anything other than a planned inspection? His phone buzzed. Another alert from his executive assistant about the upcoming charity gala. Another evening of strained smiles and superficial conversations with people who only saw his wealth. Julian stared at his reflection in the tinted window, seeing a stranger in an expensive suit. Where was the passionate young man who once dreamt of crafting havens where people felt truly at home? The Coral Coast Cafe demanded answers, and Julian Vance was determined to uncover them, even if it meant trading his tailored suits for casual wear and his penthouse for the everyday world. A short 5 miles away in Miami's Little Havana, Simone Davis was battling a different kind of struggle. Her modest apartment on Calle Ocho bore little resemblance to Julian's penthouse, yet it overflowed with something his lacked: unconditional love, joyful laughter, and the unwavering spirit of a woman who refused to be defined by her circumstances. "Mama, I can't find my lucky seashell," 7-year-old Lily called from the tiny kitchen table, her braids bouncing as she frantically searched through her craft supplies. The little girl wore a bright floral sundress Simone had lovingly mended. Her expressive brown eyes sparkled with the same innate resilience that had helped Simone navigate every obstacle life had thrown her way. "Check under your geography homework, sweet pea," Simone replied, her melodic voice carrying the warmth of someone who had learned to savor life's simple moments. At 30, she possessed a natural radiance that no amount of exhaustion could diminish, caramel skin that glowed despite long shifts, observant dark eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that could illuminate the dimmest room. This morning she wore her lucky turquoise top and crisp white slacks, the uniform she hoped would carry her through another shift at the Coral Coast Cafe. "Found it," Lily squealed, holding up the shell like a treasured trophy. "Now I can finish my drawing of our new house by the ocean." Simone's heart ached. Their current apartment was tidy, but cramped with thin walls that carried every argument from neighboring units and windows that overlooked a bustling street instead of the serene beach Lily dreamt about. But it was theirs, and Simone worked 2 jobs to keep it that way after Lily's father vanished when their daughter was 3. "Tell me about this new house," Simone encouraged, sitting beside her daughter and gently running her fingers through those beautiful braids. Lily's face lit up. "It has a huge kitchen where you can bake all your amazing cookies, and a balcony where we can watch the sunset, and my own room with rainbow walls and glow-in-the-dark stars. That sounds absolutely perfect, sweetheart." Simone's voice caught slightly. If only Lily knew how precarious their situation truly was. The job at Coral Coast Cafe barely covered their expenses, especially with the rent increase looming next month. But Lily didn't need to carry that burden. Simone glanced at the envelope on the counter containing her carefully saved tips from the past month, $380. Not nearly enough for Lily's upcoming school marine biology trip, let alone the security deposit for a better apartment. But it was progress, and Simone Davis had built her life on small victories. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Miss Elena Happy, to watch Lily after school today. That child is a ray of sunshine. Miss Elena's going to pick you up from school today, Simone told her daughter, helping her pack her backpack. And remember our rule. Be kind, work diligently, and never let anyone dim your light. That's my girl, Simone affirmed, kissing her daughter's forehead, breathing in the scent of the coconut shampoo they'd splurged on last week. These morning moments were sacred, the calm before whatever storm awaited at work. As they walked to the bus stop, Lily's small hand tucked securely in hers, Simone tried to shake the unease that had been building for weeks. Something was deeply wrong at the cafe. Money was vanishing from the tip pool. Employees were being subtly threatened for asking questions, and District Manager Derek Hayes watched everything with cold, calculating eyes that made her skin crawl. Yesterday, when she'd questioned why her paycheck was short again, Derek had cornered her in the quiet supply closet. His breath reeked of stale cigars as he whispered, "Careful, Simone. Single mothers in your position can't afford to lose their jobs, especially when they have such lovely little girls." The threat had been chillingly clear, keeping her awake all night. But what choice did she have? She desperately needed this job. Lily needed stability, and going to the authorities meant risking everything when Derek had influential connections throughout the city. "Mama, are you okay?" Lily's voice broke through her dark thoughts. Simone forced a bright smile. "Just thinking about how incredibly proud I am of you, baby girl." But as the bus approached, carrying them toward another uncertain day, Simone silently promised herself that somehow, someday, she'd find a way to protect her daughter and expose the truth. She just had to be smart about it. What do you think empowers people to take risks for strangers? Have you ever had a moment where a small act of bravery transformed everything? Share your stories below, and don't forget to subscribe for more remarkable tales of unexpected bonds that change lives. The warm ocean breeze swept through downtown Miami as Julian Vance stepped out of his rented Nissan Altima. A far cry from his usual Tesla, he'd traded his designer suits for worn khaki shorts, comfortable sandals, and a faded University of Miami polo clothes that would help him blend into the bustling tourist district surrounding his restaurant. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, worth $2.8 billion, feigning normalcy to understand why his own establishment was faltering. Coral Coast Cafe sat on the corner of Ocean Drive and 8th Street, its vibrant teal exterior and classic neon sign exactly as he'd envisioned 4 years ago. The lunch rush was in full swing, and through the large windows he could see guests seated in the rattan booths he'd personally selected. From the outside, everything appeared flawless. But Julian had learned that appearances could be deceiving. He pushed open the glass door, a gentle chime announcing his arrival. The interior maintained the Art Deco aesthetic he'd fought the design team to preserve mosaic tile floors, pastel-colored booths, and a long counter with chrome stools. Photos of Miami's history lined the walls, and a vintage jukebox played Latin jazz in the corner. It should have felt like stepping into his great-grandmother's memory. Instead, the atmosphere felt strained, almost unwelcoming. "Seat yourself," a weary-looking hostess mumbled without looking up from her tablet. Her name tag read Chloe, and her dark hair was pulled back in a sloppy bun. She wore the cafe's signature turquoise uniform, but it was wrinkled and stained. Julian chose a booth near the window, positioning himself where he could observe the entire dining room. What he saw made his stomach clench. Servers moved with obvious reluctance, their forced smiles dissolving the moment they turned away from customers. Tables sat dirty for long minutes before being cleared, and behind the counter he caught glimpses of staff members huddled in what looked like anxious conversations. This wasn't the warm, inviting environment he dreamed of creating. "Coffee." The voice was melodic despite its professional tone. Julian looked up to find himself face to face with the most captivating woman he'd seen in years. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with caramel skin that seemed to glow despite the bright lighting and dark eyes that held both intelligence and something else, a deep weariness that spoke of hard-won wisdom. Her name tag read Simone, and she wore the turquoise uniform with a dignity that elevated the simple outfit. Unlike the other staff, her appearance was impeccable, every detail perfect, despite what he suspected were challenging circumstances. "Please," he replied, trying to keep his voice casual. Black something flickered in her eyes. A flash of recognition so quick he almost missed it, but she simply nodded and moved away, her movements graceful and efficient. Julian watched her work as she moved between tables. Unlike her colleagues, Simone treated every customer with genuine warmth. She remembered an elderly woman's preference for extra sugar, helped a young father clean up his toddler's spilled juice without complaint, and somehow managed to smile authentically even when dealing with a particularly rude tourist who snapped his fingers at her. When she returned with his coffee, Julian was ready with his cover story. "Thanks," he said, affecting the casual tone of a construction worker on break. "Haven't been here before. Food any good? The key lime pie is exceptional," Simone replied, her voice carefully neutral. "My personal recommendation." She set the white ceramic mug in front of him, and that's when it happened. As she placed the coffee down, she smoothly slid a folded piece of paper underneath the saucer. The movement was so subtle, so perfectly executed, that anyone watching would have seen nothing more than a server placing a drink. But her eyes met his for just a moment, and in that glance, Julian saw fear, determination, and something that made his blood run cold: desperation. "I know who you are," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. "They're going to ruin you." Julian's hand froze halfway to the coffee cup. His heart hammered against his ribs as the implications crashed over him like a tidal wave. She knew. This server, this stranger, had recognized him, despite his careful disguise. Simone straightened her professional mask, sliding back into place. "Can I get you anything else to start the pie?" "You mentioned pie." "Coming right up." Her smile was perfectly normal, giving no indication of the bombshell she had just dropped. As she walked away, Julian's mind raced. How had she recognized him? His photos rarely appeared in local media, and when they did, he was always in expensive suits with impeccably styled hair. Today, he looked like any other middle-aged man grabbing lunch. With trembling fingers, he carefully extracted the note from under his coffee cup, keeping it low and out of sight. The paper was small, torn from what looked like an order pad. The handwriting was neat, feminine, urgent. "They are stealing from you. Meet me South Point Park tonight at 7:30 p.m. near the lighthouse. Come alone." Julian read the note twice, his coffee growing cold as the weight of the words sank in. Derek Hayes. He'd hired Derek 3 years ago based on glowing recommendations and impressive quarterly reports. The man had seemed professional, efficient, results-oriented. But if this note was true, Julian folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his wallet, his mind already racing ahead to implications and solutions. But beneath the business analysis, something else stirred a profound respect for the woman who had just risked everything to warn him. Simone returned with a slice of key lime pie that looked homemade, the crust golden and crumbly. "Our baker made this fresh this morning," she said, setting it down with the same careful precision she'd used for the coffee. "Thank you," Julian said, and this time he meant it for more than just the pie. She nodded once, a nearly imperceptible acknowledgement that his message had been received. Then she moved on to the next table, continuing her work as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Julian forced himself to eat the pie, which was indeed excellent, while discreetly observing the restaurant with new eyes. Now he noticed the small things, servers glancing nervously toward the back office, the way conversation stopped when a tall man in a crisp white shirt emerged to survey the dining room. The tension that seemed to permeate the entire space. The man in the white shirt had to be Derek Hayes, mid-40s, slicked back dark hair, expensive watch, and an air of authority that felt more like intimidation than leadership. He moved through the cafe like he owned it, his pale green eyes missing nothing. When Derek's gaze swept past Julian's table, those eyes lingered for just a moment, long enough to make Julian wonder if his disguise was as effective as he'd hoped. 20 minutes later, Julian paid his check and left, but not before catching one last glimpse of Simone. She was clearing a table near the window, and for just a moment, their eyes met again. In that brief connection, he saw the fear she'd been hiding, but also something else: hope. Walking back to his rental car, Julian's mind churned with questions and possibilities. In the span of 30 minutes, a complete stranger had turned his world upside down. She'd risked her job, possibly her safety, to warn him about corruption in his own company. Who was she? Why had she recognized him? And most importantly, was she telling the truth? As he drove away from the cafe, Julian made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Tonight at 7:30, he would find out exactly what Simone Davis was willing to risk everything to tell him. Behind him, through the cafe's window, Simone watched the Nissan Altima disappear into traffic. Her hands shook slightly as she cleared the last plates from his table, but her resolve was iron strong. She'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. Whatever happened next, she'd finally chosen courage over fear, for Lily, for herself, and maybe, just maybe, for the man who might be their only hope for justice. Julian sat in his rental car 3 blocks from the cafe, hands gripping the steering wheel as his mind waged war with itself. The note felt like it was burning a hole through his wallet, each word echoing in his thoughts with increasing intensity. Derek Hayes is stealing from you. Your people are in serious trouble. We're scared. Part of him, the successful businessman who'd built an empire from nothing, wanted to dismiss this as the ramblings of a disgruntled employee. People made accusations all the time, usually when they weren't performing well themselves. Derek's quarterly reports had been solid, his efficiency ratings high. The numbers didn't lie. But those eyes, Simone's eyes, had held something that couldn't be faked, genuine terror mixed with desperate hope. Julian pulled out his phone and scrolled to Derek Hayes' contact information. His thumb hovered over the call button. The logical move would be to confront his district manager directly, demand explanations, get to the bottom of this immediately. Instead, he found himself thinking about the way Simone had whispered those words. They're going to ruin you. Not he's going to ruin you. They, multiple people. A conspiracy. If Derek was truly involved in something criminal, calling him now would be like announcing an investigation before it began. Evidence could disappear. Witnesses could be silenced or threatened further. Julian set the phone down and started the engine. He needed more information before making any moves. Meanwhile, back at Coral Coast Cafe, Simone's hands trembled as she refilled the coffee pot for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. The lunch rush was winding down, but her nervous energy made it impossible to stand still. Every time the back office door opened, her heart jumped. Every footstep behind her made her shoulders tense. "You okay, sweetie?" asked Maria, the veteran server, who'd been working at the cafe since before Julian bought it. At 65, Maria had seen everything the restaurant industry could throw at someone, and she'd developed a 6th sense for when her colleagues were struggling. "Fine," Simone replied automatically, but her voice came out an octave too high. Maria moved closer, pretending to organize sugar packets while keeping her voice low. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Did that customer give you trouble? The one in the University of Miami polo?" Simone's blood ran cold. Had Maria noticed something? Had anyone else seen her pass the note? No trouble she managed, just tired. But Maria's weathered face showed concern. "Simone, honey, I've been doing this for 45 years. I know when someone's rattled, if you're having problems with money again, or if someone's bothering you." "Maria, everything's fine." Simone interrupted, hating how sharp her voice sounded. Maria had been nothing but kind to her since she'd started working here 20 months ago, but Simone couldn't risk involving her in this mess. The older woman's expression softened. "All right, but you know where to find me if you need to talk." As Maria walked away, Simone felt a stab of guilt. She'd been lying to everyone lately. To Maria, to her neighbor, Miss Elena, who watched Lily after school, even to her daughter, when she asked why Mommy looked so worried all the time. The lies were necessary. Derek Hayes had made that crystal clear 4 weeks ago when he'd cornered her in the dimly lit pantry. "You seem like a smart girl, Simone," he'd said, his cologne overwhelming in the small space. Smart enough to know that some things are better left unobserved, unmentioned, forgotten. She nodded, terrified, as his pale eyes bored into hers. "Good, because accidents happen in this business. People lose their jobs. Sometimes they lose more than that. And it would be such a shame if something happened to that lovely little daughter of yours." The threat had been delivered in the same pleasant tone Derek used when discussing menu changes with customers. But Simone had seen the steel beneath his smile, and she'd known he wasn't bluffing. For 4 weeks, she'd kept her mouth shut. She'd watched Derek and his crony's assistant manager, Victor Ramos, and head chef Leo Costa systematically steal from the cafe and intimidate the staff. She'd seen them skim cash from the registers, inflate vendor invoices, and pocket the difference. She'd witnessed them sell prime seafood out the back door to their friends while marking it as spoiled in the inventory system. But today, when she'd recognized Julian Vance sitting in booth 9, something inside her had snapped. Maybe it was the irony of seeing the cafe's actual owner being deceived in his own establishment. Maybe it was the memory of her father who'd taught her that silence in the face of injustice was complicity. Or maybe it was simply the desperate hope that someone with real power might finally be able to stop the nightmare that her workplace had become. Whatever the reason, she'd acted on impulse and now she was terrified. Simone. The voice behind her was calm, friendly, and absolutely terrifying. Simone turned to find Derek Hayes standing 3 feet away, his dark hair perfectly slicked back. Despite the Miami humidity, his crisp white shirt immaculate. Derek, she replied, proud that her voice came out steady. "How can I help you? Could you step into my office for a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss." It wasn't a request. Simone nodded and followed him toward the back of the cafe, past the kitchen, where Leo Costa was aggressively chopping vegetables past the storage area where Victor Ramos was supposedly taking inventory. Derek's office was small but well-appointed, with a glass-top desk that probably cost more than Simone made in 3 months. Boating memorabilia lined the walls, signed fishing rods framed photos of Derek with various Miami sports figures. The overall effect was meant to be impressive, but to Simone, it felt like a cage. Derek closed the door and gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. He settled into his leather executive chair with the satisfied smile of a predator who'd cornered his prey. "You've been with us for 20 months now," he began conversationally. "Excellent attendance, stellar guest reviews, no complaints. A model employee." "Thank you," Simone said carefully, "which is why I was surprised to hear from Leo that you seemed agitated during the lunch rush, distracted making mistakes." Simone's heart pounded. She hadn't made any mistakes. She was always meticulous about that. But Leo Costa had been watching her, probably reporting back to Derek about her behavior. "I'm sorry if I seem distracted," she said. "I have a lot on my mind with my daughter starting a new enrichment program." "Ah, yes. Lily, 7 years old now, isn't she? Such a bright little girl. I saw her picture on your locker. Beautiful child." The way he said it made Simone's skin crawl. Derek had no business knowing her daughter's name or age, and the fact that he'd been looking at the photos in her locker felt like a violation. "She is," Simone replied, keeping her voice neutral despite the rage building in her chest. Derek leaned forward, his pale green eyes never leaving her face. "I hope she stays safe. Miami can be such a dangerous city for children. All those busy streets, all those strangers who might not have her best interests at heart." The threat was barely veiled, but it was unmistakably there. Simone felt her resolve wavering. What was she thinking, trying to take on someone like Derek Hayes? He had money connections power. She was just a single mother trying to survive. But then she thought about the note currently sitting in Julian Vance's wallet. She'd already crossed the line. There was no going back now. "I understand your concern," she said quietly. "I'll make sure Lily is always careful." Derek studied her face for a long moment, clearly looking for signs of defiance or deception. Finally, he sat back in his chair. "Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Oh, and Simone, that customer you served today, the one in the University of Miami polo, did he say anything unusual? Ask any strange questions?" Simone's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to appear confused. "Strange questions? No, I don't think so. He just ordered coffee and pie." "Why, just curious. He seemed to be observing the cafe quite carefully. Made me wonder if he might be from the health department or perhaps a food critic." "I didn't notice anything unusual." Simone lied smoothly. "He seemed like a regular customer to me." Derek nodded slowly. "I'm sure you're right. After all, you're very observant. I'm confident you would have mentioned anything noteworthy." The emphasis on the last word sent chills down Simone's spine. Derek suspected something, but he wasn't sure what. That gave her a small advantage, but she knew it wouldn't last long. "Is there anything else?" she asked, rising from her chair. "Not at all. Thank you for your time." Simone left the office on unsteady legs, Derek's threats echoing in her mind. As she returned to the dining room, she caught Leo Costa's eyes following her movements. Victor Ramos emerged from the storage room and gave her a cold smile that made her stomach churn. They were watching her now, all of them waiting for her to make a mistake, to give them an excuse to follow through on their threats. But it was too late to back down. In 5 hours, she would either save Julian Vance's business and protect her fellow employees, or she would face consequences too terrible to imagine. As she returned to work clearing tables and refilling coffee cups with mechanical precision, Simone made peace with her choice. She'd spent too much of her life being afraid of her ex-partner, afraid of poverty, afraid of taking risks that might make things worse. Tonight, for the first time in years, she was going to choose courage over fear, whatever the cost. 8 miles away, Julian Vance sat in his hotel room, staring at Simone's note and wrestling with his own doubts. In 2 hours, he would learn whether his faith in a stranger's courage was justified or whether he was walking into the biggest mistake of his life. The autumn evening air carried the crisp, salty promise of winter as Julian walked through South Point Park, his breath forming small clouds in the 60 degrees weather. He changed from his University of Miami polo into dark jeans and a navy lightweight jacket, wanting to look approachable but not conspicuous. The park was busy enough with evening joggers and tourists that their meeting wouldn't draw attention. He found himself walking slower as he approached the lighthouse where families were gathering to watch the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. His palms were sweating despite the cool air. In 35 years of business dealings, he'd negotiated multi-million-dollar acquisitions, faced hostile boardrooms, and built an empire from a single struggling resort. None of that had prepared him for this moment of uncertainty. What if this was an elaborate setup? What if Simone was working with Derek Hayes to entrap him somehow? What if she was simply a troubled employee looking for attention or money? But as he replayed their brief interaction from the afternoon, Julian couldn't shake the memory of genuine fear in her eyes. That kind of terror couldn't be faked. At exactly 7:28 p.m., he spotted her approaching from the direction of Washington Avenue. She'd changed from her work uniform into dark capris, comfortable sandals, and an oversized peach-colored sweater that made her look younger and more vulnerable than she had behind the cafe counter. Her natural hair was pulled back in a high bun, and she moved with a quick, purposeful stride of someone accustomed to being efficient with their time. Their eyes met across the park area, and Julian felt an unexpected jolt of recognition. Not just of her face, but of something deeper. She looked like someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, and he understood that feeling intimately. Simone approached cautiously, her dark eyes scanning the area before settling on his face. "You came," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of waves. "I said I would," Julian replied, "though I'll admit I'm not sure what I expected. Walk with me." Simone gestured toward the less crowded path leading toward the beachside promenade. "I don't want to be overheard." They fell into step together, maintaining careful distance as they moved away from the main tourist areas. The silence stretched between them for several moments before Simone spoke again. "I need you to know that I'm terrified right now," she said, her voice steady despite her admission. "If Derek Hayes finds out I'm talking to you, I don't know what he'll do. But I can't watch this continue anymore." Julian studied her profile as they walked. "What exactly is this?" Simone stopped walking and turned to face him fully. In the soft glow of the park's lighting, he could see the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "They're stealing from you, Mr. Vance. Not just skimming the till or pocketing tips. We're talking about systematic theft that's probably cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 3 years. The use of his real name sent a chill through Julian. "How did you know who I was?" A small smile crossed Simone's face for the first time since he'd met her. "You were on the cover of Florida Business Monthly 4 months ago. The article was about your expansion into the Caribbean. I read it while waiting at my daughter's pediatrician office. You read business magazines? I read everything I can get my hands on." Simone replied with quiet dignity. "Knowledge is the only thing nobody can take away from you." Her words hit Julian unexpectedly hard. Here was a server, a single mother, based on her earlier mention of a daughter who spent her free time educating herself, while he'd become so disconnected from his own business that criminal activity had flourished under his nose. "Tell me what you know," he said. Simone resumed walking, her hands shoved deep in her sweater pockets. It started small, maybe 3 years ago. Derek would accidentally ring up meals as smaller amounts, then pocket the difference. Or he'd mark premium ingredients as spoiled when they were perfectly fine, then sell them to his friends. Victor Ramos, he's the assistant manager, he got involved about 1.5 years ago. Leo Costa, our head chef, joined them 7 months later. "What kind of amounts are we talking about?" "I estimate between $4 and $6,000 a week." Simone said quietly. "They've gotten bolder recently. Last month, Derek created fake vendor invoices for kitchen equipment that was never delivered. The invoices went to shell companies owned by his cousin in Broward County. Julian felt his jaw clench. The Coral Coast Cafe had been underperforming for 3 years, showing declining profits despite steady customer traffic. He attributed it to increased competition and rising food costs. Instead, his own employees had been systematically robbing him. "Why didn't you report this to the police?" To corporate Simone's laugh was bitter. "You mean the corporate number that routes directly to Derek Hayes' office? As for the police?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. 4 weeks ago, Derek pulled me aside after my shift. He told me that employees who observed too much sometimes had accidents. Sometimes their families had accidents. The casual way she delivered the threat made Julian's blood run cold. "He threatened your daughter by name. He knows where we live, where she goes to school, even which after-school program she attends. He made it very clear that keeping quiet was the only way to keep her safe." They had reached a more secluded area of the park, surrounded by tall palms and lush tropical foliage that rustled in the evening breeze. Julian stopped walking and turned to face Simone directly. "If you were too scared to report this before, why are you telling me now?" "What changed?" Simone met his gaze steadily. "Because I realized that staying silent wasn't protecting my daughter. It was teaching her that injustice should be tolerated. My father died when I was 17. But before he passed, he told me something I've never forgotten. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." Her voice caught slightly on the word father, and Julian saw a glimpse of the pain she carried beneath her composed exterior. "He was a port worker in Miami," she continued. "When he discovered that a foreman was cutting corners on safety protocols to save money, he reported it to OSHA. The foreman was fired, the safety violations were corrected, and 4 months later, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Completely unrelated, but he always said that doing the right thing gave him peace during his final months." Julian found himself genuinely moved by her story. "I'm sorry for your loss, thank you. But my point is, I can't live with myself knowing that Derek and his friends are not only stealing from you, but creating a toxic environment where good people are afraid to come to work. Maria, she's our senior server. She's been having panic attacks because Derek screams at the staff when guests can't hear. Carlos, one of our line cooks, asked Derek if he could have Sundays off to take his elderly grandmother to church. Derek cut his hours in half and told him that family time was a luxury he couldn't afford. With each example, Julian felt his anger building. These weren't just financial crimes. They were crimes against human dignity. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Evidence," Simone replied immediately. "Derek's too smart to leave obvious traces, but there are patterns. Financial discrepancies, inventory irregularities, vendor relationships that don't make sense. I've been keeping track as much as I can without arousing suspicion." She reached into her sweater pocket and withdrew a small notebook. Its pages filled with neat handwriting, dates, amounts, descriptions of what she witnessed. It's not comprehensive, but it's a start. Julian accepted the notebook, flipping through pages of meticulous documentation. Simone had recorded everything from suspicious cash transactions to overheard phone conversations. The level of detail was impressive and heartbreaking. She'd been building a case against her tormentors while living in fear for her safety. "This is remarkable," he said honestly, "but gathering evidence is dangerous work. If they suspect you're documenting their activities—" "They already suspect something," Simone admitted. "Derek questioned me about you today. He knows I served you, and he's wondering if you were asking unusual questions or if I noticed anything strange about your behavior. What did you tell him? That you seem like a regular customer." But I don't think he believed me completely. Leo Costa has been watching me more closely lately, and Victor Ramos has started accidentally bumping into me when I'm trying to work. They're trying to intimidate me. Julian felt a surge of protective anger that surprised him with its intensity. "We need to get you out of that environment. I can arrange for you to transfer to another location, or—" "No," Simone interrupted firmly. "If I suddenly quit or transfer, they'll know I talked to someone. Besides, you need someone on the inside to help you gather evidence. I'm the only employee willing to take that risk. It's too dangerous." "If they hurt you, Mr. Vance," Simone said quietly, "I've been in danger since the day I witnessed their first crime and chose to stay silent. At least now I'm doing something about it." Her courage humbled him. Here was a woman with everything to lose, her job, her safety, possibly her life, and she was willing to risk it all to do what was right. Meanwhile, he'd been sitting in boardrooms and penthouses completely oblivious to the suffering of his own employees. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Come back to the cafe tomorrow, but not as a customer. Derek's planning to be there early around 5:30 a.m. to receive a special delivery from one of his fake vendors. If you could observe that transaction." "I'll be there," Julian said immediately, "but I want you to promise me something. If the situation becomes too dangerous, if you feel threatened in any way, you get out immediately. You call me, and I'll make sure you and your daughter are protected." Simone looked surprised by his concern. "You barely know me. Why would you—" "Because what you're doing takes incredible courage," Julian replied honestly, "and because nobody should have to choose between their safety and their principles." For a moment, something shifted in Simone's expression. The careful distance she'd been maintaining seemed to soften, and Julian caught a glimpse of the woman she might be when she wasn't living in fear. "Thank you," she said simply. "I haven't had anyone offer to protect me in a very long time." The vulnerability in her voice made Julian's chest tighten. "How long have you been on your own since Lily was born 7 years ago?" Her father— Simone paused, then seemed to decide on honesty. "Let's just say he wasn't interested in the responsibility of parenthood. He left when she was 5 months old. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. But it also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and that Lily deserves to see her mother standing up for what's right, even when it's scary." They had circled back toward the lighthouse area where the evening crowd was beginning to thin out. Julian realized he didn't want their conversation to end. For the first time in months, he was talking to someone who wasn't trying to impress him or get something from him, someone who was simply courageously honest. "Simone," he said, "after we resolved this situation with Derek and his associates, would you consider staying on, not as a server, but in a management position? The company needs people with your integrity and observational skills." She looked genuinely shocked. "You'd offer me a job based on one conversation. I'd offer you a job based on your character," Julian replied. "Everything you've done, documenting the crimes, risking your safety, to inform me, refusing to be intimidated. Those are leadership qualities." Simone was quiet for a long moment, absorbing his words. "I've been planning to go back to school," she said finally, "to get my business degree, but childcare costs and tuition—" She shrugged. It always seemed impossible. What if it wasn't impossible? What if there was a way to work and study simultaneously with the company supporting your education? "Are you serious?" The hope in her voice was almost heartbreaking. Julian realized that for all her strength and dignity, Simone had been struggling alone for so long that the idea of genuine support seemed foreign to her. "Completely serious," he confirmed. "But first, we need to take down the people who've been terrorizing you and stealing from the company." Simone nodded, her expression growing determined again. "Tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m., I'll text you the address of the loading dock behind the cafe. Derek usually meets his vendors there to avoid the security cameras in the main dining area. I'll be there. And Simone, be careful tonight. Don't do anything that might raise suspicion." "I will. And Mr. Vance, thank you for believing me. I wasn't sure you would." As she turned to leave, Julian found himself calling after her. "It's Julian. Just Julian." She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. And the transformation was remarkable. Despite everything she'd endured, despite the fear and exhaustion, there was still light in her eyes. "Good night, Julian." As he watched her disappear into the Miami evening, Julian felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose that went beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of reclaiming his business. But more importantly, he would help a remarkable woman reclaim her life. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. If Derek Hayes thought he could intimidate Julian Vance's employees and steal from his company, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Julian sat in his black Land Rover Defender parked across the street from the loading dock behind Coral Coast Cafe. The morning air was mild at 62 degrees, and a light mist rolled off the Atlantic, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere in the pre-dawn darkness. He'd been there since 4:45 a.m. nursing a cup of coffee from a nearby 24-hour Cuban diner and trying to calm his nerves. His phone buzzed with a text from Simone. "Derek just arrived. White van pulling up now. Stay hidden." Through the mist, Julian watched as an unmarked white cargo van backed up to the cafe's rear entrance. Derek Hayes emerged from the building, his bulky frame moving with surprising stealth as he helped unload several boxes marked Premium Produce Miami Wholesale. But Julian had been in the restaurant business long enough to recognize the difference between legitimate food service deliveries and something else entirely. Real produce deliveries came in refrigerated trucks with proper logos and documentation. This looked more like a clandestine exchange than a food transaction. He raised the small digital camera he'd brought and began taking photos, the telephoto lens capturing clear images despite the distance and poor lighting. Derek was exchanging envelopes with the van driver. Definitely not standard procedure for any legitimate business transaction. 25 minutes later, after the van had departed and Derek had disappeared back into the cafe, Julian's phone rang. "Did you see everything?" Simone's voice was barely above a whisper. "I saw enough." "Those weren't food deliveries, were they?" "No, Derek's been using the cafe as a distribution point for his cousin's stolen merchandise operation. Designer bags, high-end watches, even rare cigars. He stores everything in the walk-in freezer that's supposedly broken, and then moves it through what looks like legitimate restaurant supply deliveries." Julian felt his jaw clench. "Jesus, we're not just talking about embezzlement anymore. This is organized crime." There was a pause before Simone responded. "Julian, there's something else you need to know. Something I didn't tell you last night because it's personal, and I wasn't sure if I could trust you yet. What is it? Can you meet me somewhere private? Not the cafe, obviously, but somewhere we can talk without being overheard." Julian glanced at his watch. 6:00 a.m. "Do you know the Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden? There's a coffee cart that opens early near the butterfly exhibit. I can be there in 35 minutes. I told Derek I had a dentist appointment this morning, so I have a few hours before I need to be back. I'll see you there." The garden was nearly empty, except for early morning joggers and a few dedicated photographers hoping to catch the birds during their most active hours. Julian found Simone sitting on a bench near the butterfly exhibit, watching a group of vibrant blue morphos flit among the flowers. She'd changed from her work clothes into dark jeans, comfortable walking shoes, and a soft coral jacket that brought out the warm undertones in her brown skin. "You look different," he said as he approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cart. Different how Simone accepted the coffee, gratefully wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Less guarded, more relaxed. "That's what happens when I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if Derek Hayes is going to corner me in the pantry again." Julian felt anger flare in his chest. "He's been cornering you among other things." Simone's voice was steady, but Julian could see the tension in her shoulders. "That's part of what I need to tell you about." They walked slowly along the path, their footsteps echoing in the quiet morning air. Other than the distant sounds of the city waking up and the occasional bird call, they had the peaceful space, mostly to themselves. 4 months ago, Simone began. "Derek started paying more attention to me. At first, I thought it was because he suspected I knew about the stealing, but then he started making comments about my appearance standing too close when he talked to me, finding excuses to touch my shoulder or my hand." Julian's grip tightened on his coffee cup. "Sexual harassment. It escalated quickly. 3 months ago, he offered me a promotion to assistant manager. When I asked about the job responsibilities, he said my main duty would be keeping him happy after hours. When I declined, he told me that employees who weren't team players often found their hours cut or their employment terminated for performance issues. Why didn't you file a complaint with HR?" Simone gave him a look that was part disbelief, part pity. Julian Derek Hayes is HR for that location. All employee complaints go through him. The corporate structure you've set up makes him essentially untouchable at the restaurant level. The criticism stung because it was accurate. In his drive to decentralize management and reduce corporate overhead, Julian had given district managers like Derek too much autonomy. He'd created a system that could be easily exploited by unscrupulous people. "I'm going to fix that," he said quietly. "The whole structure needs to be overhauled. I believe you will. But for now, I need you to understand why this situation is so dangerous for me personally. It's not just about witnessing financial crimes anymore." They stopped walking near a tranquil koi pond where vibrant fish swam lazy circles in the morning light. Simone sat down on another bench, and Julian joined her, maintaining respectful distance while staying close enough to hear her quiet voice. "Last week, Derek called me into his office after my shift. He said he'd been thinking about my situation as a single mother and how difficult it must be to make ends meet on a server's salary. Then he offered me an extra $600 a week to spend time with him outside of work." Julian felt nauseated. "He offered to pay you for sex." "Not in those exact words, but yes. When I told him I wasn't interested, he reminded me that he had my address, my daughter's school information, and that good childcare was expensive. He said it would be unfortunate if anything happened to my job, because then I might not be able to afford to keep Lily in her current school. He threatened your daughter again, more subtly this time, but yes. And then he showed me photos. What kind of photos? Simone's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew her phone. She scrolled through several images before handing it to Julian. I took these secretly when he was showing me. Look at the timestamps. Julian studied the phone screen. The photos showed Lily at her elementary school, at the park, near their apartment, even walking home from her after-school program. All taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. All dated within the past 3 weeks. He's been stalking your daughter, her and me both. Last Sunday, we went to the Children's Museum for the afternoon. When we got home, there was a note under my door that said, "Lily looked adorable in her polka dot dress today. Hope she had fun at the interactive exhibits." Julian handed the phone back, his mind racing. This wasn't just workplace harassment or even organized crime. This was systematic stalking and intimidation of a woman and child. Derek Hayes wasn't just a thief. He was a predator. Simone, why didn't you go to the police with this stalking and threatening a child? With what evidence? She interrupted. A note with no fingerprints photos that could have been taken by anyone. Derek's smart enough to never make explicit threats in writing, and he's friendly with several Miami PD officers who eat at the cafe regularly. Detective Sanchez has lunch there twice a week, and Derek always comps his meals. They joke around like old friends. Julian was beginning to understand the full scope of what Simone was facing. She wasn't just dealing with a workplace bully. She was trapped in a web of corruption that extended into local law enforcement. But you decided to trust me anyway. Why? Simone was quiet for a long moment, watching the koi glide across the pond's surface. Because I did my research on you after I recognized you yesterday. I spent 4 hours last night reading every article I could find about Julian Vance and Oasis Holdings. What did you find? I found out that you started with one struggling boutique hotel in South Beach when you were 28 years old. The previous owner was going to close it, which would have put 15 people out of work. You bought it with money you borrowed against your grandmother's life insurance policy. Julian was surprised she dug that deep into his background. That particular detail hadn't been covered in most of the business profiles written about him. I found out that when the 2008 financial crisis hit, instead of laying off employees, you took a second mortgage on your primary residence to keep paying them while you waited for business to recover. How did you find that information? Miami Herald archives. There was a small feature story about local businesses that didn't lay anyone off during the recession. You were interviewed, but you asked them not to mention the mortgage because you didn't want your employees to feel guilty. Julian had forgotten about that interview. It seemed like a lifetime ago. I also found the story about Elena Garcia, Simone continued, and Julian's breath caught in his throat. Elena Garcia. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over 4 years. What story? He asked carefully. 6 years ago, one of your resort housekeepers in Orlando was killed by her ex-husband. Elena Garcia, 28 years old, mother of 3 young children. When she died, you personally paid for her funeral and set up college funds for all 3 kids. You also hired her sister as a supervisor at your Key Largo location and helped her get a green card. Julian felt the familiar ache that always accompanied memories of Elena. She'd been a bright, hard-working young woman who'd been trying to escape an abusive relationship. He'd offered her extra shifts and even helped her find a safe apartment, but it hadn't been enough. Her ex-husband had found her anyway. The newspaper said you visited her children every month for 3 years, Simone said softly, that you attended every school concert, every birthday party, every soccer game. That's not something a heartless businessman does. That's something a good man does. I should have done more to protect her, Julian said quietly. If I'd known how dangerous her situation was. You did everything you could, just like you're doing everything you can to help me now. Julian looked at Simone, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time since they'd met. She wasn't just a brave employee trying to expose corruption. She was an intelligent, resourceful woman who'd researched him thoroughly before deciding to trust him with her life and her daughter's safety. That's why you knew you could trust me, he realized. Because of Elena, because of how you handled Elena's situation, yes. But also because of what I saw in your eyes yesterday when I gave you that note. You weren't angry about being deceived or frustrated about business losses. You were concerned about the people being hurt. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the garden slowly come to life around them. Julian found himself studying Simone's profile, the strong line of her jaw, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the graceful way she held her coffee cup with both hands to warm her fingers. "Tell me about Lily," he said eventually. Simone's entire demeanor brightened at the mention of her daughter. "She's incredible. 7 years old, starting second grade at Sunshine Elementary. She's obsessed with marine life and wants to be a marine biologist when she grows up. She's also convinced that she's going to discover a new species of glowing jellyfish and name it after her grandmother." "What was your grandmother's name, Celeste? So we're going to have a Lilysaurus celestia swimming in the deep ocean someday." Julian found himself smiling at the image. "She sounds wonderful." "She is. She's also the reason I can't just quit my job and disappear. Even though that might be the safest option, Lily needs stability, routine, friends. She's already been through too much change in her short life because of her father." Simone's expression darkened slightly. Marcus was, let's say, he wasn't ready for the reality of parenthood. When Lily was born with some minor complications, nothing serious, just some feeding issues that required extra medical attention, he decided that fatherhood was too stressful for him. He left when she was 6 months old. Has he been in contact since then? Birthday cards once. No phone calls, no visits, no child support, which is honestly fine with me. Lily deserves better than a father who sees her as a burden. Julian felt another surge of protective anger, this time directed at a man he'd never met. "You've been supporting her completely on your own, serving some freelance event planning when I can find it, and I clean vacation rentals on weekends when Lily is staying with my neighbor, Miss Elena. It's not glamorous, but we manage. Event planning. I was a hospitality management major before I had to drop out of college. I'm good with logistics, budgeting, client relations." That's actually how I first noticed the discrepancies in the cafe's daily receipts. Julian stared at her. "You're telling me that you've been working as a server when you have hospitality management skills. I'm telling you that I've been working whatever jobs I could get that would provide health insurance and flexible enough hours to take care of my daughter. High-end event planning firms don't typically offer part-time positions with full benefits. But if you had the right opportunity, if I had the right opportunity, I'd love to finish my degree and work in resort operations. I'd love to analyze guest experiences and help companies improve their efficiency and profitability. I'd love to do work that uses my brain instead of just my ability to carry trays and smile at rude guests." The passion in her voice was unmistakable. Julian realized he was looking at someone who'd been forced by circumstances to accept far less than what she was capable of achieving. "After we resolved the situation with Derek, he said, I want to offer you a position in corporate guest relations and operations analysis. You'd work directly with me and my COO to examine operations across all our locations." Simone turned to stare at him. "You're offering me a job I'm not qualified for. You're more qualified than you think. You identified a complex embezzlement scheme that my certified accountants missed. You documented criminal activity with meticulous detail. You recognized patterns in financial data that escaped trained auditors. Those are exactly the skills I need. Julian, I don't have a college degree. We'll arrange for you to finish your education while you work. Part-time classes, flexible schedule, full tuition reimbursement. And Lily would be covered under our executive health plan, which includes pediatric care at Miami Children's Hospital. For the first time since he'd met her, Simone looked genuinely overwhelmed. Why would you do all that for someone you barely know? Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted carrying plates in a restaurant where you're being harassed by criminals. And because... Julian paused, realizing he was about to say something that might change the dynamic between them completely. "Because I've spent the last 2 days thinking about you, and not just because of the business situation." Simone's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean that yesterday, when you handed me that note, something shifted for me. It wasn't just about uncovering corruption or protecting my business. It was about this incredibly brave, intelligent woman who was willing to risk everything to do what was right. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that. About you." The admission hung in the air between them. Julian immediately worried that he'd overstepped, that he was making an already complicated situation even more difficult. But Simone didn't pull away or change the subject. Instead, she studied his face with those perceptive dark eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Julian," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for a rescuer. I don't need someone to swoop in and fix my life for me. That's not what I'm trying to do. Let me finish, she said gently but firmly. I'm not looking for a rescuer, but I haven't had a partner in a very long time. Someone who sees me as an equal. Someone who respects my intelligence and my strength. Someone who wants to build something together instead of just taking care of me. Julian felt his heart rate accelerate. Is that what you think I'm offering? A partnership. I think Simone said carefully that you're offering me professional opportunities that I've earned through my own skills and observations. And I think you're also telling me that you're attracted to me as a person, not just grateful for my help with a business problem. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Then I should probably tell you that I've been thinking about you too. Not just as Julian Vance, the CEO, but as the man who listened to me last night without judgment, who believed me when I told him about Derek's threats, who's sitting here at 7:00 a.m. talking to me about my daughter and my dreams, instead of just focusing on his business problems. The connection between them was undeniable, now. Electric and warm despite the cool morning air, Julian found himself leaning slightly closer to her on the bench. This is complicated, he said softly. Extremely complicated, Simone agreed. I'm still technically your employee. You're about to help me expose crimes that could put dangerous people in prison. And I have a 7-year-old daughter who comes first in every decision I make. I wouldn't expect anything less. Lily should come first. But Simone continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Complicated doesn't mean impossible. It just means we need to be careful and honest with each other. Julian's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and saw Derek Hayes' name. It's him, he told Simone. Derek's calling me. Answer it, she said immediately, her demeanor shifting back into alert mode. But put it on speaker so I can hear. Julian accepted the call. Hello, Mr. Vance. This is Derek Hayes, district manager for your Coral Coast Cafe location. I understand you visited us yesterday as a customer. Derek's voice was professionally cordial, but Julian could hear an undercurrent of suspicion. That's right. I try to visit all our locations periodically to maintain quality standards. Of course, sir. I hope everything met with your satisfaction. The food was excellent. The service was memorable. Simone shot him a look, but Julian kept his expression neutral. I'm glad to hear that, sir. I wanted to reach out because one of our employees mentioned that you seemed particularly interested in our operations. I just wanted to make sure we addressed any concerns you might have. No concerns at all, just routine observation. Excellent. Well, if you do decide to visit again, please let me know in advance. I'd love to give you a proper tour of our facilities, show you some of the improvements we've been implementing. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for calling Derek. Thank you, sir. Have a great day. Julian ended the call and looked at Simone. He knows. He suspects. There's a difference, but not much of one. Simone stood up from the bench, suddenly energized. We need to move faster than we planned. If Derek thinks you're investigating him, he'll start destroying evidence and possibly relocating his operation. What do you suggest tonight? There's a delivery scheduled for 10:30 p.m., much larger than usual. Derek told the staff that we're receiving our weekly food shipment, but I know our actual food deliveries come on Friday mornings from legitimate vendors. You want me to be there tonight? I want us to be there tonight. You'll need someone inside to verify what's happening and to make sure you're recording the right people doing the right things. Julian felt his protective instincts flare again. Absolutely not. If something goes wrong, and I'm not there to explain what you're seeing, your evidence might not hold up in court. Julian, I know you want to protect me, but I'm already in this as deep as it's possible to be. The only way out is through. She was right, and he knew it. But the thought of putting her in more danger made his chest tight with anxiety. There's one more thing, Simone said, checking her watch. I need to get back to work soon, but Derek's planning something for this weekend. He told Victor Ramos that they need to clean house and tie up loose ends before the holidays. What does that mean? I think it means he's planning to eliminate anyone who might be able to testify against him, and I'm probably at the top of that list. Julian adjusted the small wireless microphone hidden beneath his navy polo shirt as he sat in his Land Rover outside Simone's apartment building on NW 2nd Street. The 3-story stucco building was typical of Miami's Little Havana neighborhood, well-maintained but affordable, with vibrant murals and wrought iron balconies. His phone buzzed with a text, "Apartment 3A, come up. Lily's excited to meet you." Julian had spent the afternoon consulting with his corporate attorney and a private security firm, both of whom had advised him to turn everything over to federal authorities immediately. But Simone was right. Without concrete evidence of tonight's illegal delivery, they had nothing but accusations and suspicions. Derek Hayes was too smart to leave a paper trail, and his connections with local police made the situation even more precarious. Taking a deep breath, Julian climbed the narrow staircase to the third floor. The building smelled like Cuban coffee and tropical fruits, with hints of someone's fabric softener drifting from an open window. He could hear muffled salsa music, a baby cooing somewhere above, and children laughing in one of the apartments. Before he could knock, the door to 3A opened, revealing Simone in dark jeans and a soft teal sweater that complemented her skin tone beautifully. She'd pulled her hair back into a loose bun with a few escaped curls framing her face. "Perfect timing," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "Lily just finished her homework, and I promised her she could stay up 30 minutes past bedtime to meet my friend from work." The apartment was small but immaculately organized, with warm lighting that made the space feel cozy rather than cramped. The living room featured a comfortable-looking cream couch with bright coral throw pillows, a coffee table covered with marine biology books and crayons, and walls decorated with Lily's artwork. A small dining table near the kitchen was set with 3 plates and what appeared to be homemade black beans and rice. "Mommy," a small voice called from the kitchen. "Is that your friend I made extra plantains?" "Yes, baby. Come meet Mr. Julian." Lily Davis was a miniature version of her mother with the same intelligent dark eyes and expressive face. She wore bright blue leggings, a yellow t-shirt with a smiling dolphin, and fuzzy fish slippers. Her hair was braided into 2 neat pigtails decorated with colorful elastic bands. "Hi," she said, brightly extending a small hand for Julian to shake. "I'm Lily Davis, and I'm 7.5 years old. Mommy says you work with her at the cafe." "That's right," Julian said, kneeling down to her eye level as he shook her hand solemnly. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily. I hear you're an expert on marine life." "I am." Lily's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Do you want to see my seashell collection? I have 52 different kinds, and I can tell you about each one." Lily Simone said gently, "Let's eat dinner first, and then you can show Mr. Julian your collection before bedtime." Over dinner, Julian found himself genuinely charmed by Lily's endless curiosity and chatter. She told him about her teacher, Miss Rodriguez, her best friend Sophia, who had the same name as her absent grandmother, but was much nicer, and shares her fruit snacks, and her detailed plans for becoming a marine biologist. "My mommy says I need to study really hard in school to become a scientist," Lily explained seriously while twirling rice around her fork. "She helps me with my ocean homework every night, even when she's tired from working." "Research is very important for scientists," Julian agreed. "Do you like working with data? I love data. Watch this." Lily proceeded to demonstrate her pattern recognition skills with her collection of sea glass, clearly proud of her abilities. Julian glanced at Simone, who was watching her daughter with obvious love and pride. The affection between them was palpable, and he could see how Simone's entire world revolved around this bright, energetic little girl. After dinner, Lily gave Julian the promised tour of her seashell collection, which was impressively organized by type and ocean of origin. She explained the difference between mollusks and crustaceans, demonstrated how marine biologists carefully tag sea turtles, and showed him her own tide pool exhibit in a small aquarium on the apartment's tiny balcony. "This is very impressive," Lily Julian said. "Honestly, you know more about marine life than most adults I know." "Really? Mommy always says I'm smart, but sometimes people don't listen to kids about serious stuff." "Well, I think you're brilliant, and I think you're going to make an excellent marine biologist someday." Lily beamed at the praise, then yawned widely. "I'm getting sleepy, but tomorrow is Friday, which means it's almost the weekend." "Bedtime, little scientist," Simone said, scooping her daughter up for a hug. "Say good night to Mr. Julian." "Good night, Mr. Julian." "Will you come visit us again? I want to show you my book about the deep ocean next time." "I'd love to see it," Julian said, meaning it completely, as Simone carried Lily to her bedroom for their nightly routine. Julian stood alone in the living room studying the family photos displayed on a narrow bookshelf. Most showed Simone and Lily at various ages' birthday parties, playground visits, trips to museums and aquariums. There were a few older photos that appeared to show Simone with her own family, including an elegant older woman who shared her bone structure and regal bearing. "That's my grandmother, Celeste," Simone said softly, returning to the living room. "The one Lily wants to name her jellyfish after. She raised me from the time I was 13. My parents died in a boating accident, and Grandma Celeste stepped in to take care of me. She was a librarian for 35 years, never made much money, but she made sure I understood that education was the key to building a better life. Is she still alive? She passed away 3 years ago, heart failure. Simone's voice was steady, but Julian could see the lingering grief in her eyes. She never got to see me finish college, never got to see Lily start school. I think about that a lot. How proud she would have been of Lily's intelligence and curiosity. I think she would have been proud of you too. Look at what you've built here. A loving home, a brilliant daughter, a life with dignity and purpose despite incredible challenges. Simone settled onto the couch beside him, leaving appropriate space between them, but close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume. Some days, I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, working multiple jobs, trying to give Lily everything she needs, worrying about money and safety, and whether I'm making the right decisions for both of us. Every good parent feels that way sometimes. The fact that you worry about doing right by her proves that you are. And other days, Simone continued, I look at her and think about how resilient and happy she is despite everything we've been through, and I feel like maybe I'm doing something right after all. You're doing everything right. Lily is lucky to have you as her mother. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the only sounds coming from Lily's room, where Simone was apparently reading a bedtime story in different voices for each character. Julian found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Not the forced relaxation of expensive spa treatments or luxury vacations, but the genuine peace that came from being in a space filled with love and authentic human connection. Julian Simone said eventually, "Can I ask you something personal, of course? Why haven't you ever married? I did some more research today, and every business article mentions that you're one of Miami's most eligible bachelors, but I couldn't find any information about serious relationships." Julian considered how much to reveal. I was engaged once about 8 years ago. Her name was Victoria Sterling. Her family owns Sterling Yachts. They build luxury vessels and private islands. What happened? I thought we wanted the same things. A life together, maybe children, eventually building something meaningful. But it turned out that Victoria was more interested in the lifestyle that came with being married to a successful businessman than she was in actually being married to me as a person. How did you find out? I overheard her talking to her sister at a yacht show. She was complaining about how boring I was, how I spent too much time working and not enough time at social events. She said she was considering calling off the engagement unless I agreed to hire a management company to run my resorts so I could focus on being seen at the right places with the right people. Simone shook her head. She wanted you to give up the work you loved so you could become a full-time accessory to her social ambitions. Exactly. And when I confronted her about it, she didn't deny it. She said that was what wives of successful men were supposed to do, enhance their husband's image and social standing. She couldn't understand why I wanted to spend my evenings reviewing operational reports instead of attending gallery openings and charity auctions. Did you love her? Julian thought about it carefully. I thought I did, but looking back, I think I loved the idea of her, the idea of having a partner, someone to share my life with. But we never really understood each other on a fundamental level. And since then, I've focused on building my business and convinced myself that I was too busy for serious relationships. It was easier than admitting that I was afraid of making the same mistake again, choosing someone who looked right on paper but wasn't right for me as a person. Simone was quiet for a moment, processing what he'd shared. What made you realize that Victoria wasn't right for you? Besides overhearing her conversation, I mean. She never once asked me about my work in a way that suggested genuine interest. If I mentioned a new resort opening or a staffing challenge, she'd change the subject to something she considered more important, what we were wearing to some event, which vacation island we should rent for the summer, whether we should hire a new interior designer for the penthouse. She didn't see your work as part of who you are. Right. And the thing is, my resorts aren't just my livelihood, they're my legacy. Every location represents dozens of families who depend on those jobs to support their children and pay their mortgages and build their own dreams. Victoria saw all of that as a necessary inconvenience rather than something meaningful. That must have been lonely. It was. I didn't realize how lonely until... Julian paused, suddenly aware that he was about to say something significant. Until I met someone who understood instinctively that the work itself matters, not just the financial results. Simone met his eyes. Someone who sees the human side of business. Someone who risked her own safety to protect people she works with, even when those people aren't always kind to her. someone who notices when numbers don't add up and cares enough to investigate, someone who turns down bribes and threats because she has integrity. Julian, someone who raises a brilliant, compassionate daughter while working 2 jobs and still finds time to help her neighbors and dream about making the world better. The space between them on the couch suddenly felt charged with electricity. Julian could see Simone's pulse beating rapidly at the base of her throat, could hear the slight change in her breathing. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. "When I handed you that note yesterday, it wasn't just because I thought you should know about Derek's crimes." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'd been watching you for months before I knew who you were. You came in for coffee every few weeks, always sat in the same booth, always polite to the staff, even when Derek was being his usual charming self. You'd bring books to read, and you'd leave generous tips even when the service wasn't great." Julian was surprised. "I didn't realize you'd noticed me specifically. I noticed everything about you. How you'd say please and thank you to everyone, including the busser. How you'd ask about people's families and remember details from previous conversations. How you'd tip extra when you knew someone was having a tough day. You were paying attention to all that." "I was attracted to you," Simone said simply. "Long before I knew you were Julian Vance, CEO of anything, I was attracted to the man who treated a tired server like she was a human being worthy of respect and kindness." Julian felt his heart racing. "Why didn't you ever?" "Because I'm a single mother working as a server, and you were clearly successful and educated and completely out of my league. Because I've learned to be careful about men who seem too good to be true, and because I was afraid that if I misread the situation, I might lose one of the few jobs that gave me health insurance for Lily." "You weren't misreading anything," Julian said quietly. "I looked forward to those coffee visits more than I wanted to admit. I told myself it was because I liked the atmosphere of the cafe, but really, it was because I hoped you'd be working. Really. Really. You have this way of making everyone around you feel seen and valued. Even when Derek was being an ass to you, you'd maintain your composure and find ways to make your customers feel welcome. I admired that strength. I thought maybe I was imagining the connection I felt when we talked. You weren't imagining it. They were leaning closer to each other now, the attraction between them undeniable. Julian could see flecks of gold in Simone's dark eyes, could smell the subtle sweetness of her shampoo. "This is complicated," Simone whispered, echoing his words from that morning. "Very complicated," Julian agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "But I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time. Neither have I. And after tonight, if everything goes well with gathering evidence against Derek after tonight, we'll still need to be careful. There will be investigations, probably a trial. Your safety and Lily's safety have to come first. I know. But Julian, I need you to understand that I'm not looking for someone to rescue me from my life. I'm looking for someone to share my life with. Someone who sees me as an equal partner. That's exactly what I want to offer you, partnership, not rescue." Then maybe, Simone said, her voice barely audible, "after we deal with Derek Hayes and all this criminal nonsense, we can explore what that partnership might look like. I'd like that very much." Julian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't, he gently cupped her face in his hand, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "Simone, His words were interrupted by the sound of Lily's bedroom door opening. "Mommy, I need some water and I can't reach the good cups in the kitchen." Simone pulled back quickly, her cheeks flushed. "Coming, baby." As she went to help Lily, Julian sat back on the couch, his heart still pounding from their near kiss. The domestic interruption had probably been for the best. They needed to keep their focus on tonight's mission. But the moment had confirmed what he'd been feeling since yesterday. This wasn't just attraction or gratitude. This was something real and deep and worth protecting. Simone returned a few minutes later carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. "Sorry about that. She's usually asleep by now, but I think she's excited about meeting you. She's wonderful, Simone. You've done an incredible job raising her." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." They spent the next hour going over their plan for tonight's surveillance operation. Julian would park across the street from the cafe at 10:00 p.m., positioning himself with a clear view of the loading dock. Simone would stay inside during her closing shift, gathering any additional evidence she could find and sending him text updates about Derek's activities. "What if something goes wrong?" Julian asked. "What if Derek suspects you're involved? Then I'll deny everything and claim I was just doing my job. But Julian, if something does go wrong, if Derek threatens me, or if things get dangerous, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll call the police immediately, even if it means our evidence isn't perfect. My safety and Lily's safety are more important than getting a perfect case against Derek Hayes. I promise. But Simone, I don't want you taking any unnecessary risks tonight. If Derek asks you to work late or go into the storage areas, find an excuse to stay in the dining room with other people around. I will. But I also need you to promise that if this goes badly, if I get arrested, or if Derek somehow turns this around on us, you'll make sure Lily is taken care of. My neighbor, Miss Elena, has agreed to keep her temporarily if something happens to me, but I need to know that someone with resources will be looking out for her long-term interests. Julian felt a chill at the thought of anything happening to Simone. Nothing's going to happen to you. We're going to expose Derek's crimes, get him arrested, and then we're going to build a life together. All three of us. You, me, and Lily. I know it's fast, and I know we need to take things slowly for her sake, but Simone, I can already see how we could be a family. Tears gathered in Simone's eyes. I've been afraid to even think about that possibility. Why? Because Lily's already had one man walk out of her life. I can't risk letting her get attached to someone who might leave when things get difficult or complicated. I'm not going anywhere, Julian said firmly. Whatever happens tonight, whatever happens with the investigation, whatever challenges we face, building a relationship, I'm in this for the long term. I want to be the kind of man who shows up, who keeps his promises, who puts family first. Do you mean that I've never meant anything more in my life? At 9:45 p.m., Julian prepared to leave for his surveillance position. As he was putting on his jacket, Simone caught his hand. Julian, before you go, I need to say something. What is it? I'm falling in love with you, she said quietly. I know it's too soon, and probably crazy, given everything that's happening. But I needed you to know before tonight. Julian felt his chest expand with warmth and joy. I'm falling in love with you too. And tomorrow, when Derek Hayes is in police custody and we don't have to worry about danger anymore, I'm going to kiss you properly. I'll hold you to that promise. You'd better. As Julian headed for the door, both of them knew that the next few hours would determine not just the outcome of their investigation, but the future of their relationship and Lily's safety. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had their commitment to each other. Julian parked his Land Rover across from the Coral Coast Cafe on Ocean Drive, choosing a spot between two larger SUVs that would help camouflage his presence. The October night was mild, with a sharp wind cutting through the empty streets of South Beach. Most of the neighboring businesses had closed hours ago, leaving only the warm glow from the cafe's windows and the occasional flash of headlights from passing cars. He adjusted the small recording device clipped inside his jacket and tested the camera app on his phone one more time. Everything needed to work perfectly tonight. They might not get another chance to catch Derek Hayes in the act. Through the cafe's large front windows, Julian could see Simone moving efficiently between tables, clearing dishes, and wiping down surfaces. Two other servers were working the closing shift, Gabby, a lively woman in her mid-50s who'd been with the company for 10 years, and Noah, a college student who worked nights to pay for his marketing classes at FIU. Julian's phone buzzed with a text from Simone *. Derek just arrived. Acting nervous. Keeps checking his watch and looking toward the loading dock. Something's definitely happening tonight. He replied, Stay visible. Don't go anywhere alone with him. Understood. We'll keep you updated. At 10:27 p.m., a dark blue panel van pulled into the alley behind the cafe, parking directly beside the loading dock. Julian couldn't see the license plate from his position, but he started recording video as two men in black hoodies got out of the van and approached the cafe's back entrance. His phone buzzed again, *. Two men just came in through the back. Derek sent Noah home early and told Gabby to finish cleaning the front dining room. He's taking me to the storage area to help with inventory. This is it. Julian's blood ran cold. No, don't go back there alone with him. Make an excuse. Stay in the dining room. If I don't go, he'll know something's wrong. I can handle this. Just be ready to call 911 if I don't text you back in 15 minutes. Simone, please. But she didn't respond to his follow-up texts. Through the cafe windows, Julian watched Gabby methodically cleaning tables, unaware of what was happening in the back of the building. The front dining room looked normal, peaceful even, but Julian's instincts were screaming that everything was about to go wrong. 12 minutes passed without any communication from Simone. Julian was reaching for his phone to call 911 when movement in the alley caught his attention. The two men from the van were wheeling out industrial-sized containers on dollies, the kind used for restaurant supply deliveries. But these containers were leaving the cafe, not entering it. He zoomed in with his phone camera, trying to capture clear footage of the men's faces and the van's license plate. The image quality wasn't perfect, but it might be enough for investigators to identify the individuals involved. 15 minutes. Still no word from Simone. Julian was about to dial 911 when his phone finally buzzed with a message, but it wasn't from Simone's number. Asterisk, Mr. Vance, this is Derek Hayes. I believe you've been looking for me. Julian's hands went numb. How did Derek get his personal cell phone number? How did Derek even know he was here? Another message arrived. Oh, did I surprise you? You're not as clever as you think you are. Did you really believe that nobody would recognize the famous Julian Vance? Even in your cute little disguise, Julian's mind raced. Someone at the cafe had identified him and reported back to Derek. But who and when? Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to drive away from here and forget everything you think you saw tonight. You're going to fire Simone Davis for theft and insubordination, and you're going to pretend this conversation never happened. And if I don't, the response came immediately. Then your new girlfriend and her precious little daughter are going to have a very unfortunate accident. Accidents happen all the time in this neighborhood. Break-ins, car crashes, gas leaks. Such a shame when hard-working single mothers get caught up in dangerous situations. Julian felt rage building in his chest. If you hurt them, you'll what? Call the police. Go ahead. Tell them about your wild theories. Tell them about imaginary criminal conspiracies. By the time they finish laughing at you, Simone and Lily will be just another tragic news story. What do you want, asterisk? I want you to understand that you're not in control here. I know about your little surveillance mission tonight. I know about the recording equipment you're wearing. I know about your plan to expose me to the authorities. How could Derek possibly know about the recording equipment? Julian had been careful to hide it, and only Simone knew about their plan. Unless... That's right, Mr. Vance. You're starting to understand. Your precious Simone has been working with me from the beginning. Julian's world tilted. That's not possible, isn't it? Think about it carefully. How convenient that she recognized you so quickly. How perfectly she played the role of the concerned employee trying to help. How easily she gained your trust and learned about your investigation, asterisk. You're lying, am I? Who else knew about your recording equipment tonight? Who else knew exactly when and where you'd be conducting surveillance? Who else had access to your personal information and daily routine? Julian felt sick, but it couldn't be true. Simone's concern for her daughter was genuine. Her fear when talking about Derek's threats was real. The connection between them, the love growing between them, that couldn't all be fake. Still, don't believe me? Check your email. With trembling hands, Julian opened his email app. A new message had arrived from an address he didn't recognize with the subject line evidence. The email contained a series of photographs that made Julian's blood turn to ice. Photos of him entering and leaving Simone's apartment building. Photos of him playing with Lily in the small backyard. Photos of him and Simone sitting close together on the couch, clearly taken through the apartment window. But the most damaging photo showed Simone shaking hands with Derek Hayes in the cafe's parking lot, both of them smiling. The timestamp indicated the photo had been taken that afternoon after Julian had left the cafe. She's been reporting your every move to me since Monday. Every conversation, every plan, every moment of vulnerability you've shared with her. Did you really think a woman like that could fall in love with a man like you so quickly without ulterior motives? Julian stared at the photos, his mind reeling. The image of Simone shaking hands with Derek was devastating, but something about it felt wrong. Her body language seemed tense, not friendly, and the angle of the photo made it impossible to see their full interaction. Don't feel bad, Mr. Vance. Simone is very good at what she does. The helpless single mother act the bright child who needs protecting the vulnerable woman looking for love. She's played these roles before. Did you know she's never actually worked at any of my other resort locations? Did you know her previous employment history includes a very interesting gap of 3 years? Asterisk. What are you saying? I'm saying that Simone Davis is a professional con artist who specializes in targeting wealthy, lonely men. And you, Mr. Vance, were the perfect mark. Julian felt like he was drowning. Everything Derek was saying contradicted what he felt in his heart about Simone. But the evidence was right there in front of him. The photos, the convenient timing of her approach, the way she'd gained his trust so quickly. Still there, Mr. Vance, or are you starting to realize how thoroughly you've been played? Where is she now, safe and sound, collecting her payment for a job well done? But don't worry, she's not heartless. She did say she felt a little bad about using your obvious loneliness against you. Apparently, you're a better man than most of her usual targets. Julian closed his eyes, trying to think clearly through the pain and confusion. But before he could process everything, another message arrived. Oh, and Mr. Vance, those federal investigators you contacted this afternoon, the ones you asked to look into my business operations. They received an anonymous tip tonight about a certain CEO who's been embezzling from his own resorts and framing innocent employees to cover his tracks. What Simone provided them with very convincing evidence of your financial crimes. Bank records, forged documents, witness statements from concerned employees. By tomorrow morning, you'll be the one under federal investigation. Julian's hands were shaking so violently he could barely type. This is insane. None of that is true. Truth is relative, Mr. Vance. And right now, the truth is that you're a corrupt businessman who got caught stealing from his own company. The truth is that you tried to seduce and manipulate an innocent employee to help you cover up your crimes. The truth is that when she refused to participate in your criminal conspiracy, you threatened her and her child. No one will believe that won't they lonely billionaire, vulnerable single mother threats and coercion. It's a very believable story, especially when it's supported by audio recordings of your conversations, financial documents with your forged signature, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Julian realized with growing horror that Derek had been planning this trap for much longer than just tonight. This wasn't a simple theft operation. This was an elaborate scheme to destroy him completely. What do you want, asterisk? I want you to disappear. Leave Miami tonight. Transfer control of your resort empire to my designated management company. Sign the papers my lawyers will deliver to you tomorrow morning and vanish from our lives permanently. And if I refuse, then federal agents will arrest you tomorrow afternoon for embezzlement fraud and criminal conspiracy. You'll spend the next 12 years in prison while I run your resorts into the ground. And Simone and Lily will continue to be in danger from your criminal associates who are unhappy about your cooperation with federal investigators. Julian felt trapped, suffocated by the web of lies and manipulation Derek had constructed. But one thing still didn't make sense. If Simone was working with you from the beginning, why didn't you just have her feed me false information about the thefts? Why involve federal investigators at all? Asterisk. Because, Mr. Vance, this was never about the petty theft operation. This was about taking everything you've built and making it mine. Your resorts, your reputation, your freedom, everything. The theft was just bait to draw you into a much larger trap. How long have you been planning this asterisk? Since the day you inherited Daddy's little business empire and decided you were smarter than everyone else. Did you really think you could build a multi-billion-dollar company without making enemies? Did you think nobody would notice how easy it would be to destroy a man who has no family, no close friends, and a pathological need to rescue people in distress? The cruelty in Derek's messages was breathtaking, but Julian forced himself to focus on the inconsistencies in the story. Derek claimed Simone was a professional con artist, but Julian had seen the genuine love between her and Lily. He'd witnessed her authentic fear when discussing Derek's threats. He'd felt the real connection between them when they'd almost kissed earlier that evening. You're lying about Simone. Am I? Then where is she right now? Why isn't she answering your texts? Why hasn't she tried to warn you that your position has been compromised? Julian's phone showed that his last 3 messages to Simone remained unread. It had been over 30 minutes since her last communication. Maybe she can't respond because you're holding her against her will. Asterisk. Or maybe she's busy celebrating the successful completion of her assignment. Mr. Vance, I'm going to give you one final chance to accept reality. Simone Davis played you perfectly. She identified your psychological vulnerabilities, crafted a persona designed to appeal to your hero complex, and manipulated you into trusting her completely. It was a masterful performance, and you fell for every moment of it. I don't believe you. Asterisk. Then prove me wrong. Drive to her apartment right now. See if she's there. See if she's alone. See if she welcomes you with the same warmth she showed you earlier tonight. Fine, I will. Excellent. But Mr. Vance, when you discover that apartment 3A is empty, that the lease was signed under a false name, and that your precious Simone has vanished without a trace, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember how easily you were manipulated by a woman who saw you as nothing more than a profitable target. Julian started his car with shaking hands, his heart hammering against his ribs. Derek had to be lying. There was no way Simone's feelings for him were fake. No way her love for Lily was an act. No way their entire connection had been a calculated deception. But as he drove toward NW 2nd Street, doubt crept into his mind like poison. Simone had recognized him remarkably quickly. She had approached him with that note at exactly the right moment. She had gained his trust with suspicious ease, and now she wasn't responding to his messages. The three-story stucco building looked exactly as it had when he'd left earlier that evening, but Julian noticed that the lights in apartment 3A were off. At nearly midnight, that wasn't necessarily unusual. Lily would be asleep, and Simone might be as well if she'd returned from the cafe, but something felt wrong. Julian climbed the narrow staircase to the third floor, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The building was silent except for the distant hum of an air conditioner and the muffled sound of a television from one of the other apartments. He knocked softly on the door to 3A, not wanting to wake Lily if she was sleeping. No response. He knocked again, slightly louder. Still nothing. Julian tried calling Simone's phone, listening for the sound of ringing from inside the apartment, but he heard only silence. Fighting down panic, he tried the door handle. To his shock, it turned easily. The door was unlocked. Simone, he called softly as he stepped inside. "It's Julian. Are you here?" The apartment was dark and eerily quiet. Julian fumbled for the light switch, and when the lights came on, his world collapsed completely. The apartment was empty, not just of people, but of everything. The comfortable cream couch was gone. The coffee table covered with Lily's marine biology books had vanished. The dining table where they'd shared black beans and rice and conversation was nowhere to be seen. The walls that had been covered with Lily's artwork were bare, showing only the faint outlines where frames had once hung. He stumbled through the empty rooms in a daze. The kitchen contained nothing but basic appliances. Lily's bedroom, where he'd admired her seashell collection, was completely vacant. No furniture, no toys, no sign that a bright 7-year-old had ever lived there. In what had been Simone's bedroom, Julian found only a single piece of paper lying on the bare floor. With numb fingers, he picked it up and read the handwritten note. "Mr. Vance, by the time you read this, you'll understand that everything you believed about me was a carefully constructed lie. I'm sorry it had to end this way, but business is business. The woman you thought you were falling in love with never existed." Julian sank to the floor, the note trembling in his hands. The handwriting was definitely Simone's. He recognized it from the original note she'd slipped him under his coffee cup, but the coldness of the message was like a knife through his chest. His phone buzzed with a final message from Derek. "Now you understand. Simone and Lily are long gone, Mr. Vance. You'll never see them again. My lawyers will contact you in the morning with the transfer documents. Sign them, disappear, and this nightmare ends. Refuse, and I'll destroy what's left of your life and reputation. Federal agents will be at your penthouse at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow to arrest you for embezzlement and fraud, unless of course you're somewhere else by then, somewhere far away where extradition might prove difficult." Julian stared at his phone, unable to process the magnitude of his betrayal and loss. In less than 72 hours, he'd gone from being a successful businessman investigating minor theft to being a heartbroken fugitive facing federal charges. But the worst part wasn't the destruction of his career or the threat of imprisonment. The worst part was the devastating realization that the woman he'd fallen in love with, the connection he'd felt, the future he'd imagined, the family he'd dreamed of building, had all been an elaborate fiction designed to destroy him. He thought about Lily's bright curiosity, her seashell collection, her excitement about becoming a marine biologist. Had that brilliant little girl been an actress? Had her affection for him been scripted? Had her bedtime routine, her innocent questions, her shy goodbye hugs all been part of an elaborate performance? The thought made him physically ill. Julian stumbled out of the love which had never actually existed. But as Julian sat in the darkness, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a question that refused to be silenced. If Simone had been conning him from the beginning, why had she looked so genuinely terrified when Derek's name was mentioned? And why had her love for Lily seemed so authentic and unguarded? Maybe Derek was telling the truth. Maybe Julian had been the perfect mark, and everything he'd felt was just wishful thinking. Or maybe this was exactly what Derek wanted him to believe. Julian sat in his Land Rover outside the empty apartment building for nearly an hour, staring at the darkened windows of 3A and trying to make sense of the wreckage of his life. The October wind rattled the car windows, and the street was empty, except for a few parked cars and the occasional taxi heading toward South Beach. His phone had been silent since Derek's final threatening message, but Julian's mind was anything but quiet. Every moment he'd shared with Simone replayed in excruciating detail: her nervous laughter when she'd first approached him, the way her hands had trembled when she'd talked about Derek's threats, the genuine pride in her voice when she'd spoken about Lily's intelligence. Had all of it been a performance, Julian started the engine and drove aimlessly through the empty Miami streets, past the late-night eateries and 24-hour convenience stores that served the city's insomniacs and night shift workers. He found himself heading toward the oceanfront, drawn by the need for space and clarity that only the vast expanse of the Atlantic could provide. He parked at South Beach Pier and walked out onto the boardwalk, the cool wind cutting through his jacket. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, dark water meeting darker sky at an invisible horizon. The city lights reflected on the waves like scattered emeralds, beautiful and distant. This is where it ends, Julian thought. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, destroyed by my own stupidity and loneliness. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk, Mr. Vance. This is attorney Robert Sterling. Mr. Hayes has retained my services to handle your asset transfer documents. I'll be at your building at 7 a.m. tomorrow with the paperwork. Please be available to sign, or my client will proceed with alternative measures. Julian deleted the message without responding. 6 hours until his world officially ended. 6 hours to decide whether to run or stay and fight a battle he couldn't win. He thought about his father, Arthur Vance, who had built their first guest house from nothing in 1990. Arthur had been a good man, honest, hard-working, devoted to treating his employees fairly and his customers well. He would be ashamed to see what his son had allowed their legacy to become. But what if Derek is lying about everything? The thought came unbidden, cutting through Julian's despair like a lighthouse beam through fog. What if the elaborate deception wasn't Simone's con job, but Derek's masterpiece? Julian pulled out his phone and opened the photos Derek had sent him. He studied each image carefully, looking for details he'd missed in his initial shock. The timestamp on the photo of Simone shaking hands with Derek was from that afternoon. But something about it still bothered him. He zoomed in on Simone's face. Even in the grainy photo, her expression didn't look friendly or conspiratorial. Her smile seemed forced, her posture tense. And was that a faint bruise on her right jawline partially hidden by her hair? Julian's heart began to race. What if that photo didn't show Simone accepting payment for a job well done? What if it showed her being threatened, coerced, or worse? He scrolled back through his text conversation with Simone from earlier that evening, reading her messages with new eyes. Derek just arrived. Acting nervous, keeps checking his watch and looking toward the loading dock. Something's definitely happening tonight. 2 men just came in through the back. Derek sent Noah home early and told Gabby to finish cleaning the front dining room. He's taking me to the storage area to help with inventory. This is it. If I don't go, he'll know something's wrong. I can handle this. Just be ready to call 911 if I don't text you back in 15 minutes. Julian's blood ran cold. Simone had been afraid, but she'd gone with Derek anyway because she didn't want to blow their investigation. She'd risked her safety to help him, and he'd been sitting in his car while Derek... What had happened to her in that storage room? Julian's hands shook as he speed-dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a missing person. A woman named Simone Davis was last seen at Coral Coast Cafe on Ocean Drive around 10:30 p.m. tonight. She may be in danger. Sir, can you describe the nature of the danger? She was investigating criminal activity at the restaurant, and the manager threatened her. She stopped responding to texts, and her apartment has been completely emptied out. How long has she been missing? Julian checked his phone. Almost 2 hours since her last message. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't file a missing person report until someone has been gone for at least 24 hours, unless there's evidence of foul play. Has anyone witnessed a crime or found signs of violence? No, but I'd suggest contacting the person's family members or friends to see if they know where she might be. If she's still missing tomorrow night, call us back. The line went dead. 0. None of that could have been arranged in a single evening, which meant Derek had known Julian was coming to Miami before Julian had made the decision himself. How is that possible? Julian thought back to Sunday morning when he'd first decided to investigate the Miami location personally. He'd made that decision alone in his South Beach penthouse, hadn't discussed it with anyone, hadn't even told his executive assistant until Monday morning. Unless... Julian pulled over and called his executive assistant Sofia Rodriguez despite the late hour. Mr. Vance, is everything all right? It's almost Sophia, I need you to check something for me. Last weekend, did anyone call asking about my schedule or travel plans? Well, yes, actually. On Saturday afternoon, someone from the Miami resort called asking about your availability for a surprise inspection. They said they were planning improvements and wanted to make sure you wouldn't be visiting unexpectedly. Who called? The caller said he was the assistant manager, Derek. Something. He seemed very concerned about making a good impression. Julian's heart sank. Derek had known he was coming before Julian had even decided to make the trip. The entire scenario, from Simone's perfectly timed approach to the investigation that followed, had been orchestrated from the beginning. Sophia, one more question. Did you tell this Derek person when I would be arriving in Miami? I told him you hadn't scheduled anything yet, but I mentioned that you typically do surprise visits on Monday mornings when you travel. Why did I do something wrong? No, you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Thank you. Julian hung up and sat in his car. Pieces of the puzzle finally coming together. Derek had known he was coming and had prepared accordingly. But that still didn't answer the most important question. Was Simone an accomplice or a victim? He drove back to Coral Coast Cafe, parking in the same spot he'd used for surveillance earlier. The cafe was dark now, closed for the night, but Julian could see light coming from the office windows on the second floor. Someone was still in the building. Julian circled the block and parked in the alley behind the cafe near the loading dock where he'd seen the suspicious van earlier. The van was gone, but the loading dock door was slightly ajar. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Julian got out of his car and approached the building. He could hear voices coming from somewhere inside, muffled conversation that he couldn't quite make out. The loading dock door opened into a storage area filled with cafe supplies, cases of canned goods, bags of coffee beans, industrial-sized containers of cooking oil. Julian moved carefully between the stacks of inventory, following the sound of voices toward the front of the building. Told you to keep her quiet, not knock her unconscious, a man's voice was saying. Julian recognized Derek Hayes' cold tone. She was fighting of the room, her head slumped forward, and her dark hair hiding her face was Simone. Julian had never felt rage like this before. Pure white-hot fury that made his vision blur and his hands shake. These men had hurt the woman he loved, had terrorized her, had used her as a pawn in their twisted game. But 3 against 1 were not good odds, especially when the 3 had guns visible in their waistbands. Julian needed help, but the police had already dismissed his concerns, and he had no proof of what was happening. His phone. He could record everything, gather evidence, then call 911 with concrete proof of a crime in progress. Julian activated his phone's camera and started recording, zooming in on the scene in the office. One of Derek's accomplices was trying to wake Simone by roughly shaking her shoulders. "Come on, sweetheart. Time to make a phone call to your boyfriend." Simone's head lifted slowly, and Julian's heart broke when he saw her face. Her right eye was swollen shut. There was dried blood on her lip, and finger-shaped bruises were visible on her throat. But her left eye blazed with defiance, even in her injured state. "Go to hell," she said clearly. Derek stepped closer to her chair. Now, Simone, is that any way to talk to someone who's offering you a very generous business proposition? I already told you I'm not calling him. I'm not reading your script, and I'm not helping you destroy an innocent man. One of the other men backhanded her across the face, snapping her head to the side. Julian had to bite his own hand to keep from crying out. "That innocent man is worth more than you'll ever see in 10 lifetimes, Derek said conversationally, "and all we're asking you to do is make one little phone call. Tell him you're safe. Tell him you're sorry for lying to him. Tell him you're leaving Miami forever. Simple. And if I refuse, then your daughter really will be in danger. Right now, Lily is safe at her grandmother's house in Orlando, completely unaware that Mommy is having a difficult evening. But that could change very quickly if you don't cooperate." Julian's heart lurched. Lily was real. Simone's love for her daughter was genuine, which meant everything else. Her fear, her courage, her feelings for him might be real too. "You bastard," Simone whispered. "She's just a child who needs her mother to make smart choices. Now, are you going to make that phone call, or do I need to send my friends to Orlando tonight?" Julian watched Simone's face crumple as she weighed an impossible choice. Betray the man she'd fallen in love with, or risk her daughter's safety. "What exactly do you want me to say?" "Simple. You're going to tell Julian that you've been lying to him from the beginning. You're going to tell him that you were paid to seduce him and gather information about his business operations. You're going to tell him that you never cared about him and that he was just another mark in a long line of wealthy men you've conned. He'll never believe that. Oh, but he will, because you're going to be very convincing. You're going to break his heart so thoroughly that he'll never question your story, and then you're going to disappear forever. Julian realized with crystal clarity that this was Derek's endgame. He didn't just want Julian's resorts. He wanted to destroy Julian completely, to break his spirit, crush his ability to trust, and leave him so emotionally devastated that he'd never recover enough to fight back. But Derek had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how much Simone cared about Julian. "I won't do it," Simone said firmly. "I won't destroy him for you, even if it means my daughter's life. Lily is strong and smart, just like her mother. She'll survive whatever you do to us. But I won't be able to live with myself if I betray the first good man I've ever met." Julian's heart soared even as he watched Derek's face darken with anger. "Then you've made your choice. Victor, call our friends in Orlando. Tell them it's time for the little girl to have an accident." One of the men pulled out his phone. But before he could dial, Julian made his own choice. He stepped out from behind the supply rack, his phone held high and recording. "I wouldn't make that call if I were you." 3 guns were pointed at him instantly, but Julian kept his phone raised. "I've been recording everything for the past 10 minutes. Video and audio of you threatening Simone and her daughter. Clear footage of you holding her against her will. Evidence of your entire criminal conspiracy. That recording is automatically uploading to cloud storage as we speak." Derek's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Victor, is it? Why don't you explain to the camera how you helped embezzle are going to arrest you tomorrow morning for embezzlement?" "Actually, Derek, that's where you're wrong." Julian smiled grimly. "See, I never contacted federal investigators this week. I was planning to handle this situation through local law enforcement and internal corporate security. The federal investigation you're referring to, that was your mistake, not mine. When you told me that federal agents would be arresting me tomorrow, you revealed that you'd initiated that investigation yourself, which means you've been planning this frame job for much longer than a few days, which means there's a paper trail of your criminal conspiracy going back weeks or months." Julian saw understanding dawn in Derek's eyes, followed quickly by panic. "But here's the really beautiful part, Derek. When I realized what you were doing, I contacted the real federal investigators. Agent Ramirez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is very interested in your elaborate embezzlement and fraud scheme. She's also very interested in your kidnapping and extortion charges. You're lying. Am I Agent Ramirez? Would you like to introduce yourself?" Julian had been bluffing about the federal agents, but his gamble paid off when Derek and his accomplices spun around toward the loading dock entrance, giving Julian the distraction he needed. He lunged forward and grabbed the gun from the nearest man's waistband, shouting "FBI, everyone on the ground" in the most authoritative voice he could muster. In the confusion that followed, Julian managed to untie Simone's hands while keeping the gun pointed at Derek and his men. Simone was weak and disoriented, but she was conscious and able to stand with his help. "Can you walk?" he whispered to her. "I think so." "Lily, we'll get her back. I promise." Julian kept the gun trained on the 3 men while he and Simone backed toward the loading dock. "Don't move until we're gone. And Derek, those federal agents I mentioned, they really are on their way. I called them from my car 20 minutes ago. It was another bluff, but a convincing one." Julian and Simone made it to his car without pursuit, and Julian immediately called 911 with a very different story than his earlier attempt. 911, what's your emergency? This is few minutes, but my heart knew the truth. What you and I have is real. Simone, what happened between us this week? That wasn't acting or manipulation. That was 2 people finding each other when they needed it most. But how did you know to look for me at the cafe? Because I know you. The woman who would slip a note to a stranger to protect other employees, who would risk her safety to expose corruption, who would refuse to betray someone she cared about, even under threat of death. That woman doesn't just disappear without a trace. That woman fights. Tears ran down Simone's bruised face. "I was so scared, Julian. Not just for myself, but for Lily and for you. Derek's been planning this for months, gathering fake evidence, building his case against you. Even if we expose him now, there might still be federal charges. Let me worry about that. Right now, we need to get you to a hospital and make sure Lily is safe." As they drove through the early morning streets of Miami, Julian realized that the choice he'd made wasn't just about believing in Simone's innocence. It was about choosing to believe in love itself, to trust that genuine connection and shared values could overcome even the most elaborate deception. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt hope. The first rays of dawn painted the Miami skyline in shades of rose and gold as Julian sat beside Simone's hospital bed watching her sleep. The doctors at Jackson Memorial had treated her injuries a mild concussion, bruised ribs, and multiple contusions, but had insisted on keeping her for observation overnight. Julian hadn't left her side. He held her hand gently, careful not to disturb the IV line, and marveled at how peaceful she looked despite everything she'd endured. The swelling around her right eye had gone down slightly, and the bruises on her throat were already beginning to fade from angry purple to yellowish green. His phone buzzed with a text from FBI agent Ramirez Derek Hayes and associates in custody. All charges dropped against you. Need to debrief when Miss Davis is feeling better. Excellent work, Mr. Vance. Julian smiled and typed back, "Thank you, Agent Ramirez. Simone should be released this morning. We'll be available whenever you need us." The real Agent Ramirez had arrived at Coral Coast Cafe 45 minutes after Julian's 911 call, along with a team of federal investigators and Miami PD. It turned out that the FBI had been building a case against Derek Hayes for months, tracking his embezzlement activities across multiple restaurant chains. Julian's evidence had been the final piece they needed to make arrests. But the most important victory had come 4 hours ago when Orlando police confirmed that Lily Davis was safe at her grandmother's house, completely unaware of the danger her mother had faced. Derek's threats against the little girl had been empty intimidation tactics. He'd never actually sent anyone to Orlando. Simone stirred in the hospital bed, her left eye fluttering open. "Julian, I'm here," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a yacht driven by Derek Hayes?" She tried to smile, then winced as the motion pulled at her split lip. "Please tell me this isn't all a dream, and that bastard is really in jail. FBI custody along with his 2 accomplices. Agent Ramirez says they found enough evidence to put Derek away for 18 to 25 years. And Lily is safe and sound in Orlando. I spoke to your mother an hour ago. She's bringing Lily to Miami this afternoon." Simone's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you for believing in me, for saving me, for everything." Julian leaned forward and gently kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to slip me that note in the first place. Without your courage, Derek would have destroyed dozens of people's lives. What happens now to your resorts? I mean, Derek did so much damage. The resorts will recover. My accountants are already working with federal, but..." "Julian, what are you doing?" He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I'm asking you to marry me, Simone Davis. I'm asking you to be my partner in life and in business. I'm asking you to help me rebuild, not just my resorts, but my entire understanding of what it means to create something meaningful." Simone stared at the ring, then at Julian's face. "Are you serious? After everything that's happened, all the lies and deception and danger, you want to get married because of everything that's happened? One life anyway." Julian took the ring from the box and held it out to her. "I'm not asking you to become someone different, Simone. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, but to be it with me forever." Simone looked at the ring for a long moment, then met his eyes. "What about Lily? She's been through so much change already, and now..." "I love Lily too. From the moment I met her, I could see where you get your strength and intelligence. I want to be her stepfather, Simone. I want to give her every opportunity in the world, but more than that, I want to be the kind of man she can look up to." Julian Simone's voice was soft with wonder. "Are you sure, really truly sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Simone held out her left hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you, Julian Vance." Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, and even in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the hospital room, it sparkled like captured starlight. He leaned down. "Happened to your face?" Simone glanced at Julian, who nodded encouragingly. "Mommy had an accident at work, sweetheart, but I'm going to be fine, and some very nice police officers made sure the people who caused the accident can't hurt anyone else." Lily studied her mother's bruised face with the serious expression of a 7-year-old trying to understand adult complexities. Then she turned to Julian with the same intensity. "Are you the nice man who helped my mommy?" "I am. And your mommy helped me too. We helped each other." "Good. Mommy deserves someone who helps her." Lily climbed onto the hospital bed and snuggled against Simone's uninjured side. "Grandma Sophia says you're rich and you have lots of resorts." "That's right. Do you have mac and cheese at your resorts?" Julian laughed. "The best mac and cheese in Miami. Would you like to try some sometime? Can I have it for lunch, Lily?" Simone started to correct her daughter's boldness, but Julian held up a hand. Actually, I think mac and cheese for lunch sounds perfect. But first, we get to live in a big house. A very big house, Julian confirmed, with your own room and a yard to play in and anything else you want. Can I have a puppy? Simone started to protest, but Julian nodded solemnly. I think every little girl should have a puppy. What kind would you like? A golden retriever, like the one in the movie? Then a golden retriever it is. Lily threw her arms around Julian's neck with the uninhibited affection that only children possess. I like you, Mr. Julian. You make my mommy smile, and you promise good things. Julian hugged her back, his heart full to overflowing. I like you too, Lily, and I promise to take very good care of both you and your mommy. Agent Ramirez cleared her throat gently. I hate to interrupt this beautiful family moment, but I do need to complete my debrief with both Mr. Vance and Miss Davis when you're feeling up to it. Of course, Simone said. Julian told me you've been investigating Derek for months. We had our suspicions about financial irregularities at several resort chains, but Derek was very careful about covering his tracks. It wasn't until we intercepted communications about his plan to frame Mr. Vance that we realized the scope of his operation. Communications? Julian asked. Derek was working with a network of corrupt managers across the Southeast. They would identify wealthy resort owners, embezzle funds, while building false evidence against their targets, then either blackmail the owners or force them to sell their businesses at below-market prices. How many other people did he destroy? Simone asked quietly. At least 10 resort owners over the past 4 years. Some lost everything, their businesses, their savings, their reputations. One man in Charleston took his own life, rather than face the shame of criminal charges he didn't deserve. The room fell silent as the full weight of Derek's cruelty settled over them. But thanks to your evidence and Mr. Vance's quick thinking, we were able to arrest the entire network. Derek's victims will finally have their names cleared, and several will receive significant financial restitution. What about the employees who were threatened? Julian asked, the people Derek intimidated into silence. All charges against them have been dropped, and we're providing witness protection services for anyone who feels unsafe. Your company's offer to pay for counseling and relocation assistance has been very helpful. Agent Ramirez closed her notebook. I think that covers everything for now. Miss Davis, take care of yourself. And Mr. Vance, the FBI, owes you a debt of gratitude. Your courage probably saved dozens of lives. After Agent Ramirez left, the small family sat together in comfortable silence. Lily had fallen asleep against her mother's side, exhausted by the morning's excitement. Simone stroked her daughter's hair with one hand while Julian held the other. Family worth fighting for. Simone lifted their joined hands and kissed his knuckles. I love you, Julian Vance, not because you're rich or successful, but because you're good, because you have integrity, because you make me believe in happily ever after. 8 months later, Saturday, June 15th, 2024, the renovated Coral Coast Cafe buzzed with excitement as guests arrived for the wedding reception. Julian and Simone had exchanged vows that morning in a small ceremony at South Point Park, surrounded by close friends and family. But they'd insisted on holding their reception at the cafe where their love story began, now transformed into a shining example of ethical business practices and employee welfare. The cafe had been completely renovated, bright, welcoming spaces with comfortable seating, an open kitchen concept that allowed diners to watch their meals being prepared, and a dedicated play area for families with children. But more importantly, it had become a model for fair employment practices throughout Julian's resort empire. Every employee now received health insurance, paid vacation time, and profit-sharing bonuses. There was an anonymous reporting system for workplace problems, regular visits from independent oversight committees, and a strict zero tolerance, a confection of shimmering blue tulle that she'd insisted on wearing with bright purple flip-flops. Mateo wants to know if I can help serve dessert to the tables. Mateo Sanchez, the new manager of the renovated cafe, had been personally trained by Julian and Simone. He was exactly the kind of leader they wanted, representing their company, fair, compassionate, and genuinely invested in his employees' well-being. I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart, but be careful not to get frosting on your dress. Lily nodded seriously and skipped back toward the kitchen, where then I'm behind schedule. I love you, Simone Vance. I love our daughter, our life. Our future together. I love you too, Julian, more than I ever thought possible. They were interrupted by the sound of clinking glasses. Sofia Rodriguez, Julian's executive assistant, and now Simone's good friend, was calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The bride and groom would like to say a few words." Julian and Simone moved to the center of the cafe. Their guests gathered around them in a circle of warm faces and your customers and love for the people who work alongside you every day. Simone took his hand and continued, "When I slipped that note under Julian's coffee cup 8 months ago, I was terrified. I knew I was risking my job, my safety, maybe even my daughter's well-being. But I also knew that staying silent would mean watching good people get hurt by corruption and greed." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "What I didn't know was that speaking up would change my entire life, that it would lead me to love, to partnership, to a future I never dared to dream about." She looked around at the renovated cafe, at the employees who had become like family, at the guests who had supported them through their journey. "This place represents everything we believe in: honest work, fair treatment, and the power of people to create something beautiful together. So tonight we want to make an announcement," Julian added. "Effective immediately, every employee in the Oasis Holdings Group will receive stock options in the company because the people who make our resort successful deserve to share in that success." The applause was thunderous. Several employees wiped away tears, and Julian saw Matteo exchange an emotional hug with his wife. Folks, what an incredible transformation. From a note slipped under a coffee cup to a love story that changed an entire business empire. Julian and Simone proved that courage and integrity can overcome any obstacle, and that true love really can conquer all. What lesson from their journey resonates most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories of love conquering adversity. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Julian and Simone found themselves alone in the cafe where their adventure had begun. Lily had fallen asleep in one of the corner booths, and Matteo had draped a tablecloth over her like a blanket. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't recognized me that first day?" Julian asked, pulling Simone into his arms for a slow dance to the soft Latin jazz playing on the cafe sound system. "I think we would have found each other eventually," Simone replied, resting her head against his chest. "Maybe not here, maybe not under these circumstances, but somehow the universe has a way of bringing together people who are meant to appreciate the next one." Click the image on your screen right now to discover more.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.